Hey, good morning, everybody. Bushman Jack out here in the fields of northern Utah with the dogs. We're out pheasant and quail hunting. Hopefully, we can get into something on this nice, brisk fall morning. Hey, stick around, and in just a minute, we're going to tell a story about a controlled burn in the fields of Missouri that got a little bit out of hand. And if it weren't for one brave soul, thousands of acres of pristine woods would have gone up in flames. Stick around. Hey, welcome everybody. It's time for another episode of Story Times with Bushman Jack. Thank you so much for joining me out here. We're in northern Utah during the pheasant opener, second day of the pheasant opener. Just went out, took the dogs out. Didn't bag any today, but we were able to work the brush and get the dogs going, get them flushing up a couple roosters, and took a long shot, but ended up missing. It was a pretty far shot. They flushed up pretty far, but it was still a lot of fun. It was good to get the dogs some work and get them out there. It's been a long season for them, a long off season, so they were ready to go. So anyways, let's go ahead and get to our story today. We've got a great one today. It's very fond memory of mine. It's a very brave, heroic story. And this story takes place in central Missouri, around the Columbia-Fayette area. And it takes place on some hunting property that my father used to own. And it's pretty close to a bunch of property that my uncle owned and still currently owns. So we would go out there throughout my childhood to turkey hunt, deer hunt, catch bass and crappie and sunfish in the stocked ponds there. Just absolutely beautiful. It's the heartland of America. Absolutely gorgeous. Heavy, thick forest with different draws and ravines, and in the middle of the property were these long pastures that were just good for farmland when they were used for that. But at the time, we had those pastures open for CRP. And so they were really covered with thick, tall grass, 7 feet plus, not even kidding. Just really thick, tall grass, lots of cedar trees and things like that. So there wasn't really a lot of strut zones for turkeys at the time. A lot of the turkeys that we killed were in the forest or just kind of in little pockets here and there. But we didn't have the big strut zones for the turkeys at the time with all this woolly grass. And we didn't have food plots for the deer. So we started doing some controlled burns out there to try and open up a couple acres here and there of pasture, so that way we could set up strut zones for turkeys and cultivate it for clover and different types of things for food plots. And so that's what we were doing on this particular day. Quite a while ago. I was probably 14 at the time. I'm 37 now, so that was quite a few years ago. And I was out there with my dad and my uncle, and we were deciding to do a controlled burn. It was a really nice area with a good chunk of woods that we had gotten, lots of turkeys within that patch of woods, but we wanted to try and open it up for strut zones. We also had some ladder stands on the perimeter, so wanted to open up some pockets for food plots, for rifle and archery hunts as well, for deer, just to kind of change that dynamic a little bit. So anyways, we're out there on a beautiful day. It's nice and sunny, a little bit of clouds here and there, but just a gorgeous Missouri day. I mean, you can't beat it. This is the heartland of America. Beautiful thick woods with nice green pastures. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. So we're out there, and we've got, I'm gonna say, about 10 acres that we have fire breaks surrounded with. So my uncle had gone through on the tractor, and he had mowed a couple paths, tractor blade width, a couple of those to give us a nice fire break, because when those fields catch fire and that grass catches fire, the flames can get pretty big. But then when it hits that fire break, the flames will just die down, and that gives us time to take the rubber flappers that we had and go over and just kind of flap out those hot spots and let it all burn within that pasture. So we're doing that. We got the Ranger, and we're I'm stationed on one side, Dad's on the other, my uncle's on the other, so kind of like almost a triangular shape. And so my instructions are very clear. Go around and look for any areas that aren't getting put out and flap the fire out. Simple enough, right? So as we're going, we're burning off little sections here and there. Everything's going okay. You know, a couple little bits of fire try to trickle across the fire break, and run, get that put out, no problem. Wind starts to pick up a little bit. At this point, my uncle and I have kind of joined, and my dad's on the far side of the field. And so my uncle and I kind of paired back up. He came over to just make sure he had his side pretty secure, and he just came over to make sure that I had everything going, because I'm a teenager at this time, so got to check on the teenager and make sure that he's paying attention and that we got that all taken care of. So he comes over and he's like, "So Joe, everything looked pretty good over here?" I'm like, yeah, everything's fine, no worries. And the wind's blowing that way, so fire's gonna move that direction, so I'm not too worried about it. And my uncle pauses for a second and he says, "Now Joe, there's something you gotta know about the Missouri wind. The Missouri wind is as fickle as a woman. It will change its mind at the drop of a hat. So you can never count on the direction of the wind, because it's fickle like a woman, and on a dime, it could turn and the flames could start going your direction. So you take care of that fire break and you make sure you're always paying attention." I will, Uncle. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that I take care of that. But those are words I remember him saying to this day, is just that Missouri wind being fickle as a woman. So every time I hear that word, I just think of that Missouri wind. So anyways, so I'm refocused. I'm back to making sure that everything's taken care of. So my dad's on the far side, and he kind of gives the thumbs up to say like, "Hey, I'm ready for you guys to light the next section." So my uncle's like, "All right." So he takes the torch and he lights another line of fire. And sure enough, that fickle Missouri wind picks up, and the flames just boom with that wind, just boom, and they get high. I mean, we're talking a wall of 10 to 15 feet high fire. It just starts roaring to the side between my dad and my uncle. And my dad's taking care of his side, my uncle's taking care of his side, but the stretch in the middle, that's where that fickle Missouri wind starts blowing towards. And this wall, 10 to 15 feet high of flames, is just roaring towards that side. Now we got the fire breaks, so we're hoping everything's okay. And we're Dad and Uncle Roy they're keeping an eye on it. But there's a little stretch of woods that points out towards that fire break. Just a little draw of woods that fingers out and gets pretty close to that fire break. And so that's the area where this wall of flames is coming towards. And so for my section, I kind of come around the corner so I can get a better look at things. And my uncle hops on the Ranger and he drives over, and he picks me up, and we're going over to talk to Dad because everything looks okay on our sides, but we see that wall coming there. And so we come over, we ride over, we're talking to Dad. We're like, "Hey, it's really roaring towards that side. We got to keep an eye on it." And so we turn around and we see the wall of flames hit that break, and our hearts are thumping because we're like, "Oh, please die down. Please die down when you hit that fire break. Otherwise, we are in trouble with that patch of woods fingering out towards there." And so all of a sudden, that wall of flames hits the brake, and then boom, it dies down. And we're just like, whew, thank goodness. And so now we're like, okay, kind of game plan, like, hey, let's kind of divide and conquer. Let's make sure that we're getting over and putting down all the little pieces, and have a drink of water and things like that because we're exhausted. And then all of a sudden my dad turns around and looks back at that spot near the finger of woods, and he sees a trail of flames, probably 2 feet high, starting to go across that fire break, and it gets to the other side of the fire break, and it is starting to trickle off towards that patch of woods. All of a sudden, I don't know how, I cannot explain it, but I swear I heard the theme music with like the training montage from Rocky Balboa when the trumpets start, and all of a sudden you just hear bum 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 bum. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody's seen it, right? And I just see my dad grab his flapper, and all of a sudden he starts pumping his arms. Serious look on his face. Now this guy is ex-army, ex-cop, construction worker, tough as nails, no fear, literally stepped on the head of a rattlesnake when he was a younger man in Montana, because he was hiking and discovered this snake, when he looked down, was by his foot and was in his way. And instead of being cautious and backing up, he just get out of my way and kept on his merry way. This guy is tough as nails. And so he's probably in his late 40s at this time, but he grabs that flapper, and with that Rocky training montage, somehow majestically echoing in our minds, he is just running what appeared to be slow motion, but I assure you, he was running flapper in hand, stone look on his face. He was running at top speed. Very similar to when Rocky is in, I think it's Rocky 3, when he's racing on the beach against Apollo Creed in the training. And all of a sudden you see him just surpass Apollo Creed. That is the type of running that my dad was doing, running towards this fire. And so we're like, yeah, my uncle and I, we're like spitting our water out, and we're like, holy cow, I'm like, Uncle, what do I do? What should we do? He's like, you know, let's go to our sides. Because Dad was so quick. He was already like halfway to that fire. He's like, you keep an eye on this spot in case that fickle Missouri wind comes this direction. I'll drive around to the other side and make sure it doesn't decide to spread on us, okay? But he said, now you listen here, Joe. You listen here, Joe. You keep an eye on your father, and you be ready to spring into action if he needs help. I'm like, yes, sir. Absolutely. You got it, man. And so we're ready, and the whole time I'm flapping out little bits of flames, and I'm keeping an eye on it, keeping an eye on Dad. And Dad gets over to the flames. Remember, they're like 2 feet tall at the time. It was just this little trickle that came, this 2 foot high trickle that came across the break and got onto the other side, trickling towards the woods. And so he runs and he gets down to where that finger starts, and then, you know, he gets down, it kind of dips down a little bit, so we see him go down into that dip, and he starts flapping like a madman, just flapping and flapping and flapping away. And I'm like kind of on pins and needles. I'm on edge. I'm like, should I run over there? Should I not? I'm kind of looking over at my uncle, and he's still flapping stuff on his side, and I still got some flames trickling on this side. And I'm like, well, if I run over there, then so I'm like, if I run over there and my stuff takes off over here, and Roy's stuff, my Uncle Roy's stuff, takes off over there, now we're in big trouble because we have 3 sides. So I'm like, I better stay put until it's like absolutely dire. So I'm seeing my dad just flapping away, just every sweat you could see. I'm literally like 100 yards away from him. You could see the beads of sweat falling off of him. You could see the determination. You could see the effort flapping against the flames. And he's not flapping the trickle of flames like we are. They're 2 feet high, and you see them start to spread. they're starting to spread and form a wall. And he's just flapping here and flapping there and flapping in the middle and going and going and going and going and going. And it's looking like he's starting to lose the battle. It's starting to get dire. And I keep checking in with Uncle Roy, and I'm like, do we jump in? Do we go? Like, do we leave our post? And just not getting the go ahead yet. And this little wall, 2 feet high, probably 10 feet wide, has now surrounded my dad. He stood against the wall of flames, between those flames and thousands of acres of pristine Missouri woods that would have gone on to neighbors' property and gone on for miles potentially. This could have been absolutely devastating. But as this 10-foot wide, 2-foot high wall of flames surrounded my dad, at this point, I can't take it anymore. The worry, the panic that not just could the woods be overtaken, but could my old man be overtaken by the flames. And so I'm like, okay, I flap my stuff out real quick, kind of look around, smoking a little bit, but I'm not seeing any flames here and there. I'm like, okay, I think my post is okay, even though I don't have the go-ahead nod from the other side from my uncle. I gotta go. So I grab my flapper and I start running. I don't hear the training montage for some reason, but I start running. And all of a sudden, as I'm getting there, the wall of flames just turns into a puff of billowing smoke. Thick smoke, like you can't even see it. You can't see the patch of woods there. You can't see Dad anymore. And I'm like, what happened? Did he do it? Is he okay? Is he laying there? Did he get the fire out, but did he fall and drop down from overexhaustion and heat? I'm like, what's going on? And so I get there. I'm running, and I get there, and I get amongst the smoke. Just that thick smell of freshly burnt grass and sticks and smoke right there just gets heavily strong in my nostrils. And all of a sudden, emerging from the smoke, stumbling out, billowing with sweat, his face black and charred from the ash, with flapper in hand, emerges Dad. And he stumbles out and he drops down to his knees, breathing heavily, and then sits down in pure exhaustion. My Uncle Roy sees, gets his stuff taken care of on his side, and he sees, and he hops on the Ranger and drives over. And he comes over, and my uncle's like, Mike, are you okay? And he's just, water. And so I hand him some water from the Polaris Ranger, and he just like whole liter, just downs that water, lets out one final last really big breath, and then appears to catch his breath and be like, it's done, it's out. And so after that, I'm like, okay, like, do you need to go back to the truck? Do you need to take a break, whatever? But being the courageous man that he is, said, absolutely not. We have got to make sure that this fire is 100% put out. We're not going anywhere until the whole perimeter is taken care of. So he said, give me a few minutes, and then let's get back to our post. So we take a few minute break, we all drink some water, and then we divide and conquer. And so we check our different sides, flap any little bits of smoky areas just to make sure everything's looking okay. My uncle rolls around on the Ranger, picks me up, and then he drives back to a charred black spot going across the fire break and trickling towards the woods and forming a 10-foot wall. And he pulls the Ranger over, he stops, and he gets really quiet. A very serious look on his face, very Winston Churchill-like. And he says to me, "Joe, you see that black spot that almost reached the woods?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Joe, this will forever be remembered as the spot or the site of your old man's historic last stand, because that could have been it for this beautiful, pristine patch of woods, and it could have been it for him. But instead of running and cowering, your old man took a historic last stand. And so every time we drive by, every time we hunt that stand, every time we hunt Maverick Lane, and we drive by this area, we will always remember the historic last stand taken by your dad." I said, "Absolutely." And so what we learned from this story, reflecting back on a time that just an average American man stood against the flames, risked it all, gave it all against that fickle, woman-like Missouri wind that created a dangerous situation. What we learned is that any of us can be a hero. You don't have to be some super duper muscular macho man. You don't have to be a cop. You don't have to be a firefighter. You don't have to be anything like that. You could just be a father. You could just be a rancher. You could just be a store clerk. Whatever it is, you could be a hero. You could make your own historic last stand to not only save hunting property, but people's legacy, people's memories. Because if that whole property and if miles and miles of Howard County got burned up, it wouldn't just be land that would be devastated. That would be the memories of not only our family, but our neighbors' families. The places where their son shot their first turkey. The places where they saw their first deer. Legacy. Legacy was preserved by the historic last stand of my father. And that is a day that I'll never forget. And words and lessons from that day, such as never underestimate the fickle Missouri wind. Those memories have reigned true, and those lessons have stayed in the back of my mind ever since. And so, thanks for joining me today, Bushman Jack. We'll have another story for you here in the coming weeks. I'll be taking a trip to Nebraska to hunt deer, and so we'll look for some opportunities to make some more memories and share some more stories with that. Thanks for joining me, and as always, live life outdoors.